Thanks for joining me today. So today I'm going to be tying a pattern called the Grim Reaper. It's a salmon fly, probably more suited to the end of the season. In the vise I've got a Partridge Patriot size 10 black nickel, and I'm going to be starting off with some Semperfli classic waxed 8.0 in red. So I'm just going to catch on whip on about halfway down the shank, roughly where I want my centre hackle to be. I always like to whip on for my salmon flies there. It's a good way to mark where you want to finish your body, just so as you don't creep too far up. And I'm going to tie in some gold oval small. Just trim a bit of this off. I'm going to be using it for my tag and both of my ribs, both rear and front. So again, catch it in roughly where you want your centre hackle to be, and then start working down towards where the two hooks split, and then start your tag working down. So we'll go for 4 turns in our tag, and then up in between the splay, catching it down 3 or 4 turns, and then I'm going to trim it off. So for the tail, I'm going to be using some red bucktail. I don't know how clear you can see that in the camera. So we'll just trim off, probably to start with I'll trim off more than I need. I'll take the tips, I'll try and line them up a bit just by my eye. They don't have to be perfect. You could drop them into a hair stacker if you want it. Any broken fibres there, pick them out. There's one in there, if I can just get it. There we go, that should do us there. And then for the length of the tail, I like these quite long, so I'm going to go for at least 1.5, probably closer to twice the length of the shank. There's a long fibre there, I'll just take that out. So that's probably twice the length of the shank there. Just come in over the top, 3 or 4 turns to tie it down. Again, there's another broken fibre just on the camera side, so just trim that out of the way. I'm going to add a little bit of flash as well, so I have a strand of pearl micro flash. So I'm going to tie in the length of the flash. I'm going to tie it in along my side, and then I'll tie it in along the camera side. Just wrap a thread over it and pull it back up. The weight of the bobbin holder will hold it in place. A couple of turns over the top to secure it, and then I'm going to fold a pair of them back over and wrap a thread or 2 just to secure it. So just pull the flash down, trim the rest of it out of the way. It doesn't need to be perfect, we can tidy that up at the end. And then come back in with my gold oval for my rib, half a dozen turns, and I'll trim this waist out of the way now. And then just with our thread, tidy that up and come back down to our tag. So for the rear body in this, I'm using some red Light Bright. I'll just pick off a little bit of that. very, very little. You don't need very much. And then we'll dub it onto our thread. It's a lot easier just to put a little bit on, and if you need to add rather than have too much and try and take it off. So the good thing about this is it dubs on quite tight. Takes a good bite to the thread. Just make sure I don't cover the tag. And then touch and turns, working our way up. Maybe just take that little bit off. There we go. Wasn't too bad. And then we'll come up with a rib. So 3 turns or so over the top with our thread to tie that down. Trim off our waist. Now I like to add another tail, which is red Arctic fox. You don't need very much of it. It just helps add a bit of bulk to the profile. Gives the fly a nice shape. So we'll trim off a piece of that, take any of the under fur out, and then any long guard hairs, I like to take them out. And for the length of that, probably halfway into your tail. Maybe go a little bit longer with that. It just helps give your fly a nice profile, that sort of shrimp-like look. It's kicking up slightly with the body, but not too bad. The hackle will hold that down. Now if you want it, you could add 2 strands of flash in the tail and come in and add 2 in there, but I just like to add the 4 in at the start. Now for our hackle, I have my red badger cape. I have 2 feathers already picked off, and what I'm going to do with those is I'll take the first one, catch it with my hackle pliers, double the fibres over, and then just where the tip is, take scissors, trim off my tip and catch it in. A few turns of thread to hold it in place, and then we're going to wrap our hackle. Again, depending on how dense you want it, and that's probably down to personal preference as to your length of hackle. Some people like them quite short, just touching the hook points. Some people like them extending well down in towards the bend. So end of season pattern, usually plenty of water. I wouldn't be a bit afraid of going with an extra turn. You know, I don't really think you could overdress it too much with an extra turn or 2. A few turns of thread to catch your hackle in, trim off our waist, and then just make sure everything's lying right. If it's not, push it back with your finger and thumb, a couple of turns of thread to catch it in place. Now, it's not too bad there. I'm just going to come up my shank again to where I want my front hackle. It's always good to lay a nice layer of thread. It helps bind your materials in, and then I'll come in again with my rib. So we'll bring that down to your hackle. There's one wee fibre there. Just bring him back. There we go. So our front body is some gold light bright. Now, again, less than we used in the first one, the first body. We just want to make sure we don't take everything too far up and we have plenty of room to finish off. I see a bit of thread there. Good thing about the dubbing is it's very, very forgiving. It's easy to cover. There we go. Then a couple of turns of a rib, catch off. Trim off our waist. Just add a few more turns of thread there. There we go. And I'm going to add some jungle cock eyes. I have a pair here. I like to add them before my final hackle. It just helps, definitely helps keep your head small. Get this other one. Get those tied in. Just push them point to point to make sure they're the same length. Yep, they're pretty good. So we'll hold them in together. A few more turns. That's quite good. They're quite splayed at the minute, but once I come over the top with my last hackle, I should hold them down a bit. I'll just trim off any waste ends. You could double them over, but I don't really think it's necessary for securing them. Plenty of wraps down there, and then I'm also coming over the top with more wraps from a second hackle, so they shouldn't ever slip. So again, same as the first hackle, double it over, just expose the tip, make sure that's in camera shot, trim off so we have a little tag for tying in. Half a dozen turns to hold everything in place. And we'll come in with a few wraps of hackle. I think picking some nice well marked badger hackles makes all the difference. You know, you want a good black bar going down so it's quite visible. If there's not much of a bar, then once you come to tie off with your thread, you can cover a lot of it, and by the time the fly's finished you wouldn't really notice whether it's a red badger or just a standard red hackle. Just trim that off. It's quite good there, nothing really sticking forward. So a few turns of thread there just to hold it down. I can see, there I see it in the camera nearly better than I can see it with my own eyes. Try not to cut my thread. That's away, there's one. There it is there. I've seen it just sticking over the top of the shank. So we'll trim that back. Yep, that looks better. And now I'm going to finish with this thread, so I'm just going to whip off. Five turns is more than ample. So trim off there, and then to finish off the fly I'm going to come in with some Glow Bright number 3. It's a little bit darker than the number 4. I think it suits darker patterns really well. Certainly for grills I would probably opt more for the brighter. I'll go for the number 4. I prefer it for Wilkinsons and probably around summertime, July, early August Calvins. But just for whatever reason, towards the back end, I like the number 3. It matches well with the colour of the fly. So again, just a few turns with the whip finish, and then we're ready for a drop of varnish. A little bit going on in that pattern, quite a long video, but it seems to be very popular at the minute. I know I get asked to tie it an awful lot. I've had quite a few people asking me for the recipe for it, so I just thought I would, now that I've started doing a few videos again, it was a prime example, or a prime candidate for doing one. Just coming in, usually put 3 coats of varnish or so on. Again, some people like the UV resin, but I find the resin coats the thread, it doesn't really soak into it, whereas your resin, or your varnish, sorry, it takes a few coats to build up a head, but I think it makes the head an awful lot stronger. Let's just check this tinsel at the back. That's not too bad, it's relatively even. Can't really see it, it's off camera anyway, but I'll just come in and straighten it up. And there you have the Grim Reaper shrimp fly. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video.